Original Sin issue number 0. And again, all this was designed to do is to give us an understanding of the Watcher, to give us this idea of what the possible impacts could be if the Watcher were killed, which is something that we'll pick up with Original Sin issue number 1. So Original Sin issue number 1 brings us into the Original Sin storyline proper. And the way that Marvel has organized Original Sin for us is actually pretty good. It's actually pretty interesting. What we see is that the groupings, or the individuals who appear in the Original Sin event, are grouped in such a way where we see the most common individuals ranked first, along with the subsets, the subset teams, or the teams that will form as a branch off of different superheroes and the order in which they will appear in. What we see here is that Wolverine, Black Widow, Captain America, Nick Fury, Thor, and Iron Man are the first ones to appear, and in fact these are the ones that we will largely pick up with as the story begins. But then we see that the smaller groupings here, Black Panther, Ant-Man, and Emma Frost, Doctor Strange and the Punisher, Bucky Barnes, and Moon Knight and Gamora are going to be teams that are formed for particular tasks. Each individual team is going to perform a task that's been laid out in order to understand or to discover the mystery of this whodunit story, of who it was that had killed the Watcher. And so what we see here as the story opens up, as the story progresses, is that we join up with various superheroes. We join up with Captain America, with Nick Fury, with Black Widow, and Wolverine. And all we really see here for the most part is them just having some witty banter, talking about the best steak they ever had, and so on and so forth. There's no real purpose here except to maybe show us what these characters do or how they relate to one another when they're on their off time. But what we see here is that the phone of Captain America rings, and Captain America, as we see, is contacted by Thor. Now, the fact that we're only given one half of the conversation isn't really, it doesn't really take away from the effect. What we see here is that apparently Thor is very panicky on the other line. Thor is very excited, or at the very least, is speaking in such a way that it gives Captain America pause for concern. Captain America hangs up and tells everybody that they need to gather together, and they need to head out. They need to meet with Thor. Nick Fury chooses to stay behind. He elects to tell everybody. From here, we switch to the perspective of Wolverine and Black Widow, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, and Nick Fury. And we see that someone has murdered the Watcher. Somebody has killed the Watcher. And this is very important here. And the reason why is because, as Nick Fury will explain later on, there are not very many people that can do this. And so what we see is this maybe crime scene investigation of sorts, where we see various individuals trying to understand what's going on here, trying to figure out what's taken place. But because of the fact that the Watcher is so enigmatic to them, they don't really know how to proceed. For example, Captain America says or asks if they should check for a pulse, but they don't even know if he ever really had a pulse to begin with. They don't know exactly how it is that he functions. The fact that he can be killed indicates, of course, mortality, and indicates that, for the most part, the fact that he was shot in the head and died, that he probably functions in the same way as a normal human. But again, this isn't necessarily guaranteed. We also see that Tony Stark says that he's taking readings, energy readings of the Watcher, and realizes that there are no energy readings, that the Watcher's dead. What we also see here is that Iron Man says that the question has to be asked here, who could have done this? Who could have shot the Watcher in the head? Was it Thanos? Was it maybe Red Skull in the Cosmic Cube? And we see that Black Widow chimes in, and Black Widow says this was done with a gun. She says that given her expertise, her experience, both investigating deaths and being the person who's perpetrated multiple killings, that she's well aware of what the effect is when a person's shot with a gun. And this was most certainly a gun. From here we see that Wolverine asks the question, what kind of a gun could do this? What kind of a gun could be powerful enough to kill the Watcher? What we also see here is that Nick Fury chimes in and says that the Watcher's eyes are gone. Now this is extremely important here, and the reason why is because what we're going to see referred to as we progress through this comic towards the end, and especially into other comics, is something that's referred to as the Unseen, something called the Original Sin. And we won't find out what this is until much later on. But what we see is that Nick Fury, investigating further, says that both of them were carved out, most more than most likely. Then he asks the question, what kind of a person would take another person's eyes? What we also see here is that Thor says that this is madness. This is total insanity for somebody to kill someone and take their eyes. And we also see that Wolverine says that there's really no scent for him to pick up here. There's no way for him to track the person because of the fact that the machines that were used by the Watcher to keep the place clean were very good at their job, and so there's no scent left. From here, we switch to Captain America. And Captain America more or less takes all the information that we've gained to this point and throws it in such a way that we can understand it clearly and quickly. And he simply says that there's a killer on board, somebody armed with a gun that can kill the Watcher and also has all the weapons, or presumably also has all the weapons that were in the possession of the Watcher. What we also see here is Captain America talking to Nick Fury. And Captain America tells Nick Fury that he needs to get everybody on this, that he needs to get as many groups as he can, which includes S.H.I.E.L.D. and SWORD. Now, SWORD is a group that we haven't talked about. In fact, SWORD actually appeared during Joss Whedon's run of Astonishing X-Men. But SWORD stands for Sentient World Observation and Response Department. And SWORD is a counterpart to S.H.I.E.L.D., where S.H.I.E.L.D. exists to monitor earthbound threats, to monitor earthbound individuals, both superhero, superpowered, and otherwise. SWORD monitors extraterrestrial worlds, monitor other aliens, to ensure that there's no kind of extraterrestrial threat against the planet Earth. And so we see that the fact that somebody has the kind of technology or the kind of weapon that would be powerful enough to kill the Watcher is a weapon that needs, or that may very well be owned by an extraterrestrial of some kind. And so we see that, of course, Captain America is including SWORD to rule this concept out. But what we see here is that Nick Fury says that the number of people who even realized the Watcher was alive is a very small list, and the number of people who could successfully kill the Watcher is smaller still. And so he tells Captain America that not all the names on that list are bad guys, that not everybody that had the power to kill the Watcher is a bad guy, that it may lead to some friends. Captain America responds by saying that the Watcher was murdered, and that all he cares about is the truth. From here, we switch to Wakanda, we switch to Black Panther, and we see that Black Panther is talking to some unnamed individual in the shadows. And Black Panther, for the most part, just gives us this understanding that he's well aware of what's taking place, or at the very least, he understands the concept of what's gone on, that the Watcher had at some point been killed, and that the attempt is being made to find out who it was that killed him. But what we see here is that this individual is asking the question, why is it that this individual, that this unnamed person, is enlisting the aid of Black Panther? Why is he coming to Black Panther and asking for help? This person says that the Avengers, despite the fact that they are a formidable team, are sometimes just not cut out for everything. And this is an instance whereby they're not cut out for the task that's going to be necessary in order for this mystery to be unraveled. We see this individual has sent some pictures or some files of some kind to Black Panther, and Black Panther, after looking at these, asks him what it is that's been sent here. This unnamed individual responds by saying that it's a trail. It's a trail that goes in different directions, but it all leads to the same place. And when Black Panther asks what it is, he says it leads to the unseen, that it leads to the original sin. From here, we see Black Panther a little irritated here because this person's being cryptic, and of course we see that Black Panther asks if the one link, if the common theme that all these things, all these roads lead to, is the person that killed the Watcher. Then we see this individual say yes. This individual says that appears to be the case. From here, we see that Black Panther again says, if this is the case, if you have all the evidence here, if you have all the answers here, then send the Avengers to capture this person. And we see this unnamed individual telling Black Panther that these aren't answers, that these are questions that may lead to answers. And so we see that this individual says that he's formed several teams, he's formed various individuals who are going to come together to try to decipher this chaotic mystery, try to come to an understanding of what it is that has gone on here. From here, we see the first team beginning to form, where we see Scott Lang. And again, Scott Lang is the reincarnation, or I guess the newer version of Ant-Man. And to make it a very short summary regarding his character, Scott Lang was originally an electronics tech, and a genius-level electronics guy. And there came a point where he was down on his luck, where he had a few problems, and eventually when he was watching a crime being perpetrated, he stole the outfit of Ant-Man, and he had used it to keep this crime from happening. And so as a result, we saw that Hank Pym allowed Scott Lang to continue using his Ant-Man outfit, and Scott Lang took on the moniker of Ant-Man. And what we see here is that Ant-Man is joining forces with Emma Frost. And again, this is all post-Civil War. This is all post-Avengers versus X-Men and so on. And so Emma Frost is still considered by many to be an outcast. She's still considered by many to be part of the force that created the Phoenix Five, a member of the Phoenix Five. And so, of course, after the events of Avengers versus X-Men, she's been cast out by quite a large number of people. What we see here is switching. We see this kind of a scenario, I guess, taking place where Emma Frost, who under normal circumstances would never join forces with Scott Lang, is now on his team. We don't really know what the whole purpose of this is. We don't really know why it is that they've gotten together. But what we see is this transition to the Punisher in Los Angeles. And we see that Frank Castle is apparently torturing some person for information. Frank Castle is attempting to get answers out of him, and this person is telling him that he knows the answer to the question that Frank Castle is asking. He tells Frank Castle that he'll take him to where these individuals are buried. Now, in terms of these individuals, who they are, it's not really relevant to the story. All it is simply us being, us seeing Frank Castle in this element. And what we see is that as Frank Castle is torturing this individual, that Dr. Stephen Strange appears. And Stephen Strange tells the Punisher that this individual is telling the truth. The Punisher replies by saying that he knows this person was telling the truth. He says the first 15 minutes were for making him talk, and that the last hour was because he deserved it. And so we see Dr. Strange replying by saying that this individual has had enough, and that Frank Castle and Dr. Strange need to leave. They need to go on their mission. And so we see that Dr. Strange teleports this individual away. From here, we switch to Moon Knight and Bucky Barnes. And what we see is that, again, the final team here is being formed. The final team is finally coming together. And as the two progress, as the two come along their, travel along their route to wherever it is that they happen to be going, we see that these individuals finally come across their third teammate. And this third teammate is revealed to us to be Gamora, the daughter of Thanos. From here, we switch back to Nick Fury. And Nick Fury is pondering this circumstance. Nick Fury is pondering this mystery of who could possibly be the Watcher, what possibly could happen that would have led to this. He also, thinks on the fact that the individual who was successfully able to kill the Watcher was a person who was seasoned. This was not the very first time a person's ever done this. That it was not done with a shaky hand. That this person had precision accuracy. This guy knew exactly what it was that they were doing. We see that Nick Fury says that this person has killed before. This is not the very first time this person's ever killed anybody. And so what we see is that Captain America joins Nick Fury, and the two of them begin talking. We see that Nick Fury says that S.H.I.E.L.D. is working with SWORD, and they're using satellite and all different forms of surveillance to try to figure out what in the world happened here, to try to figure out what it is that has led to this situation. What we also see is that some bullet fragments have been dug out of the skull of the Watcher, and that the bullet fragments were gamma irradiated. Now, this is extremely important here. This is a very important clue regarding this mystery, and it's very important that you guys pay attention to this. We see that the initial idea here is to talk to Bruce Banner to find out what's been going on, because Bruce Banner is the foremost authority on gamma radiation. From here, we see that Captain America's conversation with Nick Fury is interrupted when he gets an incoming call where he gets some resonance of a conflict taking place in New York involving the Fantastic Four. And from here, we switch to the Mindless Ones and the Thing. Now, the Mindless One is a general term. The Mindless One is a group of individuals. They don't really have particular names. They're simply just referred to as the Mindless Ones. And the Mindless Ones are interdimensional beings. They exist beyond, in between universes, beyond our universe, or in different realities and dimensions. But they have no real will of their own. They're mindless by their very nature. And so they exist to do the bidding of whoever it is that is able to gain their servitude. What we see here is that as the Thing and the Mindless One are fighting one another, that Spider-Man comes to the aid of the Thing. And Spider-Man is the first one to realize that this is one of the Mindless Ones. He realizes that these are extra-dimensional monsters, that he's fought them before, and that the power of these things is incredible. But what we see here is that the Mindless One is telepathic. The Mindless One is able to communicate using his mind, and according to Spider-Man, this is something that should not happen. Now again, this is yet another thing that's very important here, and I hope you picked up on the number of things that are out of the ordinary here, the number of things that are happening regarding different characters or scenarios that shouldn't normally happen, that seem very, very strange. In addition, what we see here is that as the Mindless One is communicating with Ben Grimm and Peter Parker, that while his speech initially starts out as broken English, while he initially starts out as being unable to form proper sentences, that his speech will become inherently better. He also says things like, why was he made to know? That he was better not knowing. That he understands what pain is now, that he knows what pain is, and that he was better not knowing what pain was. We also see that at this point the thing begins to physically attack the mindless one and is joined by Peter Parker. But again, what we see here is that the mindless one is telepathically communicating. The mindless one is that they never should have gone to the moon. Now again, we don't know exactly what this means, but we're led to believe here that perhaps whoever it was that had killed the Watcher had enlisted the aid of the mindless ones, and that through some kind of act, maybe some sort of power that we haven't seen yet, maybe some sort of ability that hasn't been displayed to us, that this individual was able to endow this mindless one with telepathy. What we see here is that the mindless one says that they found things there. They found things that were changing them, that were making them different, that were making them see. And they said that, the mindless one says that the man on the moon is the one who knows. The man on the moon is the one who's aware. And the man on the moon was getting revenge on them by making them know, by making them aware. But again, we don't understand what this means. But what we see here is that the mindless one is wielding the ultimate nullifier. Now again, if you recall our discussion on Original Sin issue number 0, we had talked about how the ultimate nullifier was in the armory of the Watcher, and so the fact that the mindless one is now in possession of the ultimate nullifier indicates to us that the mindless one was in fact on the moon. From here we see that Ben Grimm is trying to talk the mindless one down. He's trying to get the mindless one not to use the ultimate nullifier. He's trying to get the mindless one to disarm himself. From here, what we see is the mindless one saying that you can't change what I've seen, that nothing can change what he's done. We also see that he was more content. He says he was more content being mindless before. He was more content not having a will of his own. But the fact that he's been made aware now, the fact that he has in fact been made to see, means that he's now aware of sin, and that sin is all that he can see. At this point, we see that Captain America and Nick Fury arrive on the scene, and we see that when Captain America initially asked, okay, the thing Ben Grimm says, not everybody, and of course we're left here to see that the mindless one had destroyed itself. At this point, we again see that Captain America initially takes over the scene. Captain America initially says that they are going to, of course, leave the ultimate nullifier where it is, and nobody needs to touch it, and that a decontainment team needs to be brought in order for them to analyze the circumstances, analyze the environment, to see if they can perhaps gain some evidence regarding the mindless ones and their possible involvement with the death of the Watcher. And what we see here is that Nick Fury takes over. Nick Fury says that this has been turned into a crime scene, and that he is officially in charge. From here, we switch to Emma Frost, Scott Lang, and Black Panther. And what we see here is that they're traveling to the center of the Earth. They're traveling to perhaps maybe a deeper layer and not necessarily the core. And it seems a little strange to Scott Lang that they are traveling to the center of the Earth to perhaps find who it was that had killed the Watcher. What we also see is that that Frank Castle, the Punisher, and Doctor Strange are traveling to their own location. That they're in fact traveling to a different dimension. They're traveling to places beyond the main Earth 616 universe. What we also see here is that Gamora and Moon Knight and Bucky Barnes are again continuing their own search as they've banded together, and that they are traveling throughout various places. They're going to be traveling through space. They're going to be looking through all these different parts of the cosmos to try to find what's been going on, to try to find perhaps the individual who has killed the Watcher. From here, we switch to the mindless ones, and we see that there are a multitude of them. And we see an individual saying that he can't control them anymore, that he can't make them bend to his will. This individual is saying that they're changing, that they're evolving, most likely due to the power that has been used. But what we see here is that that these mindless ones are evolving because of what this individual is in possession of, and that this individual is in possession of one of the eyes of the Watcher. From here, this brings an end to Original Sin issue number 1, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. For the most part, the beginning of Original Sin was pretty riveting. It was pretty exciting, and it was a very enjoyable read. But I think that what you will find, a little disappointingly so, is that as we progress with the Original Sin storyline, that the story will sort of begin to take a downward spiral, that it will begin to move in a direction that's maybe not necessarily the best, but again, I leave that to you guys to decide for yourselves. So as we pick up with Original Sin issue number 2, it's very important that you guys pay close attention to what's going on, because what we're going to see here is that these stories are going to take off. They're going to move extremely fast. And so there's not going to be a whole lot of explanation in terms of who individuals are and so on, just because for the most part there won't be a whole lot of time for it. We're going to get quite a bit of information in a very short amount of time as we progress through these videos. So what we see going on here is we're with Emma Frost and Black Panther as they are near the center of the planet. And what we see is that they've encountered the Moloids. Now the Moloids are the de facto henchmen of Mole Man, more or less. And for the most part, they're not really relevant to the story, although I would like you to keep them in the back of your head, because what we're going to see is that when we get to our discussion of Old Man Logan, the Moloids are going to play a role. And so if you're unfamiliar with them, you're going to be a little confused as to what the relevance is regarding their characters in that storyline. But what we see is that Emma Frost and Black Panther are looking at the Moloids, and they're trying to figure out what's going on in this environment. What we see is that they've encountered a giant skeleton of sorts, and they more or less figure out that whoever it was that had been here, whoever it was that had been depositing bodies here, is a person who didn't want anybody to find it, who thought this was a very well-hidden dumping ground. In addition, we see Scott Lang is looking for various sources of radiation. Scott Lang is looking for some kind of maybe gamma irradiation or something that could help them a trail that will lead to who it was that was dumping bodies in here. What we also see is that Frost is telepathically speaking with the Moloids, telling the Moloids that she's not there to hurt them, none of them are there to hurt them, that they're simply just conducting an investigation and they'll be out of their hair pretty soon. But what we see is that the Moloids simply state, or as far as Emma Frost can tell, that the Moloids don't really know what's going on, that every few months somebody comes down there and some bodies are deposited, but they don't really know where the bodies are coming from. And then at this point we see a depiction of the fact that there are a multitude of bodies here, and they all seem to be of alien origin or some kind of extra-dimensional origin. All these bodies belong to monsters, some of which are relatively recent, and some of which are skeletons indicating they've been there for quite some time. From here we switch to New York City, where we follow the story of Nick Fury, Captain America, and others. And what we see going on here is that that Captain America, Black Widow, Spider-Man, and Iron are pursuing somebody in particular. They're pursuing something, although at this point we don't really know what it is. But what we see is that this is one of the mindless ones. And again, these are extra-dimensional beings that, for the most part, they're not supposed to really have their own will. They simply just do as they're told, more or less. And what we see is that while Captain America and Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Black Widow are chasing the mindless one, they're giving Nick Fury information. Nick Fury's flying around the side of the building, and they're informing him of where it's at. What we see is that the mindless one jumps out of the building and lands in a car, in Nick Fury's cover car. And we see that, again, this mindless one is displaying telepathy here. This mindless one's displaying the fact that it does have a mind. We see that it pleads with Nick Fury to let it go, that he has to keep running, and that he has to keep running to outrun his own mind, indicating that this was just a sudden burst of intelligence. This was a sudden introduction of intelligence to the mindless ones, and they don't know how to deal with this influx of knowledge and telepathy, indicating that maybe the thoughts of other individuals are pushing their way into their mind because, again, they don't know how to control their newfound telepathic abilities. From here we see that Nick Fury engages the defenses of his car to try to subdue the mindless one, but it's not working. This is very important here. The first time that he ever knew what sin was, and he asks whether or not a person deserves to die for their original sin. Nick Fury thinks this is an admission of guilt. He thinks that the mindless one is admitting that he had killed the Watcher, and the mindless one simply replies by saying that he still can't bear to look at the Watcher's eye. At this point, we see Nick Fury jettison from the car. He initiates the ejection mode, and with his jetpack on, is able to escape, and effectively crashes the car. At this point, we see the mindless one pleading that he wants to be mindless again, that he doesn't want to have any sort of intelligence, that he demands to be made ignorant again. But we see that, of course, this is not something Nick Fury can grant, and Nick Fury simply just shoots the car and blows the car up. From here, we transition to Doctor Strange and the Punisher, and we see that this is simply just listed as elsewhere. It's simply described to us as somewhere far beyond the realms of man. But what Doctor Strange tells us is that this is a realm of man in shadows. Again, if you recall our discussion on Doctor Strange, what what we had talked about is that Doctor Strange, during his solo storylines or even during his storylines of Strange Tales, would constantly visit various dimensions, some of which were extremely strange, some of which were very interesting and relatively familiar. But this is an instance of visiting a dimension whereby the things are very weird and very odd. We see the Punisher saying that, or asking the question if they thought they were supposed to be hunting a murderer. And Doctor Strange says yes. Doctor Strange says that's what we're here for. And the Punisher deduces that they're simply supposed to be bait. In addition, we see Doctor Strange say that he's conjured birds. He's conjured these sort of energy-based birds, and that they will find a murder victim regardless of where it is. From here, we transition to them teleporting to the location of the discovered murder victim. And the murder victim appears to be some kind of ancient king of the world, king of the ancient world rather, as Doctor Strange tells us. And that this creature is quite massive. It's pretty huge in size. In addition, we see that the Punisher immediately gets to work on trying to figure out what in the world was going on here, what in the world it was that maybe killed this creature, caused its death. And again, at this point, the Punisher is not really sure why he's along here. He's really not sure why he's been brought here if we're going to be traveling to other dimensions, whereby Doctor Strange is really the only one who has any power in these locations. But what we see is that the Punisher deduces why it is that he's here, that he's here to more or less figure out what killed these beings, while Doctor Strange keeps him protected to a degree. And we see that the Punisher is able to locate a pretty massive gamma-irradiated villain. Now from here we transition back to Earth, and we're back with the Mindless Ones. And again, the Mindless Ones are quoting different things. Their minds are catching up to the fact that there's a lot of intelligence to be gained. And we don't really know, again, how it is that this happened. We don't really know how it is that the Mindless Ones were able to gain their abilities shy of looking into the eye of the Watcher. In addition, we see that the two unnamed individuals that we had yet to see are, again, in possession of one of the Watcher's eyes, and they're talking about how the Mindless Ones are evolving, how they are expanding in terms of their overall abilities, but that so are these two individuals, that they are gaining more power simply just by being in possession or maybe looking into the eye of the Watcher. From here, we see these individuals continuing to talk. These individuals are saying things like, the idea of facing the Avengers, the idea of the fact that the Avengers will eventually come for them. And we see this individual simply saying that the Avengers will not be able to handle this when they arrive, that when the Avengers show up to confront this individual, that the Avengers are going to be faced with the power of the Watcher's eye. From here, we see this individual yelling out, calling to various individuals, but what we see is that this group of individuals are in fact the Avengers proper, that for the most part, all the Avengers, including Nick Fury's team, the team of Black Panther, Scott Lang and Emma Frost, and Doctor Strange's team are converging on this tower where these individuals are housing the Mindless Ones in addition to the Watcher's eyes. And what we see is that the Mindless Ones and Exterminatrix, who is the daughter of Dr. Midas, begin to attack the Avengers. Now, Exterminatrix is a character that we haven't really talked about yet, and in truth, she's not really relevant. She's one of these instances of a character who's being elevated, but isn't really a character who matters that much. What we see going on here is that the Mindless Ones and Exterminatrix get into a very drawn-out brawl with the Avengers. And we see that that Sam Alexander of Nova Corps, along with various other individuals, are fighting the Mindless Ones and Exterminatrix. But what we also see here is that the possessor of the Watcher's eye is leading someone who appears to be the Thing down a set of stairs. But what we see is that this is in fact Dr. Midas. Now, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with Dr. Midas, Dr. Midas is an individual who has the power to turn anything to gold once he touches it, but he's also a genius-level person. Now, why it is that Dr. Midas is part of this story is something that I have yet to figure out. I'm not really sure why he's here. But what we see is that this individual and Dr. Midas are talking about the Watcher's eye. They're talking about how the Watcher has seen everything in human history. And this individual who's in possession of the eye believes that everything that the Watcher has seen is still within his eye, and he's simply trying to find a way to take it out. What we also see here is Dr. Midas asks this individual, how do we get the secrets out of there? How do we get the secrets that the Watcher had? And this individual says that he's been trying to figure that out, and he doesn't know the answer to that. In addition, we see that once this individual and Dr. Midas get down to the ground level, we see that the mindless ones have, for the most part, been totally defeated by a combination of the Thing of the Fantastic Four, the full new Avengers, Sam Alexander, and Storm of the X-Men, including Daredevil and various other superheroes. And what we see is that this individual begins to reveal himself. This individual says that the Watcher's eye is a bomb, and that all bombs go boom. From here, we're going to bring an end to this story, and we'll pick up with issue number 3, where we learn what happens when everyone is exposed to the eye of the Watcher, and what happens when everyone is exposed to the secrets that they had long since thought dead, or the secrets they didn't think anybody else knew of. So with Original Sin issue number 3, what we see here is that we're picking up almost immediately after the events of Original Sin issue number 2. But this issue is very, very important for the Original Sin storyline. The reason why is because this storyline will not just lay the foundation for future actions in the storyline involving other characters, as well as the tie-ins, but it will also pertain to the production, or I guess introduction, of newer characters in the realm of Marvel Comics as a whole. And this will become doubly so when we get to the section of Original Sin where we talk about what it was that Nick Fury had said to Thor that caused him to lose the ability to wield his hammer. And what we see going on here is that, again, this takes place immediately after Original Sin issue number 2. And so where all these members of the superhero community, the Avengers, and some of the X-Men had gathered to confront Dr. Midas and the Orb in turn uses the powers of the Watcher's eye to expose everyone's secrets. And what we see here is that a vast array of things are going on here. There is now new information in the minds of various superheroes involving other people. All these secrets that belong to anybody they had ever known are now inside their heads, and so they know everything. Now, with regards to the Incredible Hulk, what we will see in Hulk vs. Iron Man is that we'll see this sort of storyline playing out, whereby we get a little more information in terms of how it was that Bruce Banner became the Incredible Hulk in the first place. And when we get into the story of Spider-Man, we'll learn about the circumstances that led to Spider-Man, or Peter Parker, becoming Spider-Man, and the fact that he was not the only one that this happened to. From here, what we see going on is that Dr. Midas, Oubliette, and the Orb are attempting to make their getaway as a result of the fact that the superheroes, for the most part, are entirely distracted by the fact that their secrets have been laid bare. But what we see is that before the Orb can get away, he's confronted by Nick Fury. And Nick Fury tells him to put his hands on his head and that he's under arrest for murder. What we see here with the Orb is the Orb says there's no need for that. He says that he's not the one that Nick Fury's after. That the Orb wants to know who killed the Watcher just as much as Nick Fury does, because it wasn't the Orb who did it. From here, we transition back to Black Panther, Emma Frost, and Scott Lang. And what we see here is that they're talking about the idea of these bullets that they've collected through the corpses of these bodies, these gamma-irradiated bullets. And we see them talking about how all these different creatures, all these different, I guess, monsters or mutants or what have you, are here, but somebody had put them here. And if somebody had the power to kill these things, then somebody must have been doing this for a very long time. And the question has to be asked, what does this have to do? How does this tie into the Watcher being killed on the moon? We see Black Panther telling us that, again, our killer, that the killer that has eliminated all these monsters, has been doing this for a while and has the skills to remain hidden. And so he says that perhaps the Watcher was killed because the Watcher saw this happening. The Watcher saw that this individual was killing all these things, and as a result, the Watcher lost his life because of it. Emma Frost goes as far as to ask the question, was it because he saw the killer? Is that the most likely case? And Black Panther replies that the Watcher sees everything, even the unseen. Now, the unseen is a very important element with regards to this comic. And again, I'd like you to keep this in the back of your head, because what we will see later on as we get into, or I guess as we progress further, is that we'll learn what the unseen is. From here, we transition back to Doctor Strange and the Punisher. And the Punisher says that this individual was shot from some distance away, that most likely it was somewhere around maybe 4,000 yards, and that regardless of the kind of gun that was used, it would take an incredibly accurate person to pull off a shot like this. Frank Castle says that this can only be done by a handful of people on the planet Earth, that maybe 10 people actually have this skill to do this. From here we see Doctor Strange pondering this information. Doctor Strange simply saying that this is a little weird, this is a little strange, and he's a little, dissatisfied by the fact that there are killers that are roaming these dimensions, and he doesn't really know what the ramifications of this could be regarding other dimensions. We see Frank Castle asking Doctor Strange if Doctor Strange is referring to him, and Doctor Strange says, what's the difference? He says there's really no difference between Frank Castle and whoever this anonymous killer is. But Frank Castle says that when he kills somebody, he doesn't hide it, which of course is something that we're quite aware of reading through the Punisher comics. What we see here is that Doctor Strange then tells tells the Punisher that if only 10 people are able to kill on this scale, or able to kill somebody from this far away with this level of preciseness, then he wants to know who they are. He wants the exact list of those individuals that are capable of this kind of thing. From here, we switch to Bucky Barnes, Moon Knight, and Gamora. And again, these individuals are conducting their investigation off the planet Earth. They're investigating space as a whole. But at this point in the story, they haven't really encountered anything yet. Where Emma Frost and Black Panther and Scott Lang had traveled to the center of the Earth and encountered aliens and monsters that had been killed, and Doctor Strange and Punisher had encountered their own sort of extra-dimensional beings, we see that for the most part, Gamora and Moon Knight and Bucky Barnes haven't found anything. And because they haven't found anything, they feel like this is a fool's errand. Gamora says that this is silly. She says there's really no need for them to be here, that if they're going to be looking for the murderer of the Watcher, there'd really be no reason why the murderer would be out in space. The Watcher was on the moon, and so most likely the murderer is on the planet Earth or hails from the planet Earth, and that they should be investigating the Earth instead. What we see here is this weird kind of circumstance where the ship that they're traveling in begins to encounter all these bullets. They begin to effectively fly into a field of bullets, into shell casings. And for the most part, they're not really sure what in the world's going on here. They don't really understand how it is they're flying into bullet casings, but they continue to follow the trail. From here we see that, again, they're reporting their information, they're reporting their investigation to an anonymous individual who we can't see. And for the most part, we're led to believe that this is the same individual that had given their information, or given the information to Black Panther, that had set this entire investigation in motion in the first place. And what we see with this individual is that he's saying it won't be long. He's talking to, we assume, a henchman of some kind, and says that they need to make things ready for when their visitors arrive, that they need to prepare for the worst should the worst happen. In addition, he says that they're going to need a lot more of these gamma-irradiated bullets, indicating to us that perhaps this unknown individual is the one behind the entire conflict in the first place. From here, what we see is the orb, and the orb is being interrogated, so to speak, by Wolverine and the Incredible Hulk. And again, this isn't necessarily a torture session of any kind, whereby they're actually inflicting harm, but they're both using their extreme physical prowess, Wolverine in his violence and the Incredible Hulk with his sheer strength, to attempt to threaten the orb, to try to get the orb to confess, to try to get him to tell them what in the world's been going on. But what we see here is that the orb says that while they're looking for the person who killed the Watcher, while they're looking for this individual, that he will not give them any information, that the only person he wants to talk to is Nick Fury, and that unless they bring him Nick Fury, he's not going to say anything. From here we see that, again, the information, this interrogation is being seen by some individual, which of course is, I guess, introduced to us as Nick Fury. Now, what it is that Nick Fury is actually doing here, what it is that he's actually monitoring, is a little strange, because what we see for the most part is that he's keeping an eye on everything. He's monitoring everything that has gone on here. We see for the most part that he speaks to Captain America, and Captain America says that they've lost the trace of Dr. Midas. In addition, they can't find the mindless ones. Apparently, Iron Man has lost track of their scent, more or less, or the ability for him to locate them. And so, for the most part, they are right back at square one. What we also see here is that as a result of the orb bringing everybody's secrets into the light, a multitude of the superheroes, about half of the superheroes, have run off. They've gone to different locations. We don't really know what they're doing. All we really know is that they've disappeared. But most likely they're trying to deal with this idea that secrets they were previously unaware of are now common knowledge. In addition, we see that Nick Fury is examining the Eye of the Watcher, the eye that he had gotten from the orb. And what he says here is that this thing seems to be a living storage device, and of course this information came from Reed Richards, that everything the Watcher sees is quite literally recorded within the eye itself, and that when the orb had I guess, expose everybody's secrets, that it was like throwing a series of grenades, and that everybody was privy to everybody's information. But what we also see is that he again continues to examine. He says the good news here is that only people who are in the immediate vicinity were affected, meaning the entire world has not been made aware of everybody else's secrets. But he says the bad news here is that half their team is gone. From here we also see that Nick Fury asks an interesting question. He asked Captain America what it was that he saw when he was exposed to the secrets that he wasn't aware of. But what we see Captain America say is that he's not going to tell him, that it's not part of the mission. From here what we see is again Nick Fury kind of talking to himself, while at the same time talking to Captain America. He said that it's a little strange here that Captain America wouldn't give him any information, wouldn't tell him what it was that he saw, because as far as Nick Fury knows, Captain America doesn't have any secrets. But Nick Fury says he has a lot of secrets, says he has all kinds of information. And the question is, why didn't he see anything when he was exposed to the eye of the Watcher? From here we transition back to Gamora, Moon Knight, and Bucky Barnes. And what we see here is that they've traced the location of these bullets to a planet. And as they're investigating this planet, they're trying to figure out what in the world's going on. For the most part, it appears that somebody has managed to kill an entire planet. Somebody has quite literally shot bullets into the planet itself, but they can't really figure out why. They say that, as far as they can tell, the radiation levels on this planet are extremely high. And so it's quite possible that at some time or another, a civilization inhabited this planet and the civilization itself had been wiped out. But what we see here is that there's no signs of any kind of civilization having been there. There's no signs of former settlements. That if an individual had arrived on the scene, arrived on the planet, and annihilated the entire civilization, there would be structures. There would be something to indicate that people had lived here. In addition, we see that Bucky Barnes is able to dig out one of the bullet fragments, or I'm sorry, a full bullet rather, and he begins to say that these are bullet holes, that the planet itself is completely shot and riddled with bullets, and that only two circumstances are most likely. Either this individual was a terrible shot because he shot straight down into it, or he was intending to shoot straight down into the planet, in which case the question has to be asked, why? From here we see that Bucky Barnes is able to piece together this puzzle, and he tells them to initiate a camera, to throw a camera into orbit around the planet. And what we see here is that as the camera begins to shoot around, that of course Gamora and Moon Knight ask him what he's doing this for, that if a planet's dead, they really serve their purpose. There's really nothing else to investigate here. But what we see is that as the camera begins to pan around along the bright side of the planet, that the planet itself is revealed to be a living planet, more along the lines of something like Ego, the living planet, or something similar, which of course is very interesting here, because what this tells us is that this individual that's been killing a multitude of aliens has in fact killed an entire planet, which would require a vast array of both power and prodigious skill in using various forms of weaponry. From here, we transition back on the surface of the planet with Bucky Barnes, Gamora, and Moon Knight, and what we see is, of course, they're shocked to see